Hello, this is a free call from an inmate at
All Red Unit. This call is being recorded and is subject to monitoring.
To accept this free call, press 1. Thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
Skye Rose.
Hello.
Hey. Let me turn you up a little bit. There we go. So we are going over part 3 of Man's Search for Meaning. You got through more of this than I did. I've been very busy. I'm doing the 3-job tango. So I haven't had energy to read, but I did grab a few things. Do you want to start us off with what you gathered?
Sure. He quotes Nietzsche. He quotes Nietzsche when he says, that which does not kill me makes me stronger. And he's talking about all the experiences that they went through and not giving up hope. And the fact is, being in prison, I have ample opportunity to look, to reflect and look back on times where I felt like, giving up hope, and it's just it comes down to just bearing your cross, bearing the suffering that you go through. It's one of those situations that it's difficult. It's difficult to go through this. Sometimes I just, I find myself questioning, well, what does life have left for me? With an indeterminate prison sentence, having a life sentence, but I want to quote Viktor Frankl here. He says, that's sort of a segue into the book, because I've come to the point where I've asked myself, what can I really expect? They don't have to let me go. I've been here my whole life, but that doesn't mean anything.
Right, and for people that are listening and don't know your history, Skye Rose was incarcerated at 16 years old. So when she says her whole life, she means she's spent her whole life, her whole adult life in a prison, and most of her teenage years in a prison as well.
Right. Yeah, I'm 40 now, and I've been incarcerated since I was 16 without any breaks. Flat time, meaning I haven't gotten a chance to get out and come back. I've just been here. And I'm going to go ahead and read from the book at page 72. It says, woe to him who saw no more sense in his life, no aim, no purpose, and therefore no point in carrying on. He was soon lost. Typical reply with which such a man rejected all encouraging arguments was, I have nothing to expect from life anymore. What sort of answer can one give to that? What was really needed was a fundamental change in our attitude toward life. We had to learn ourselves, and furthermore, we had to teach the despairing men that, and he addressed this in italics because it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. And we needed to stop asking about the meaning of life and instead to think of ourselves as those who were being questioned by life daily and hourly Our answer must consist not in talk and meditation, but in right action and in right conduct. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problem and to fulfill the task which it constantly sets for each individual. These tasks, and therefore the meaning of life, differ from man to man, from moment to moment. Thus, it is impossible to define the meaning of life in a general way. Questions about the meaning of life can never be answered by sweeping statements.
Yeah, and I think when we think of great philosophers and great thinkers, going all the way back to like Aristotle, you know, they all were pondering the purpose and the meaning of life. I think it's one of life's like great unanswered questions. And even myself, like, you know, I ask often, like, what is the meaning of all this? What is the purpose? What is my purpose? And I think about you often because somehow you manage to get up every day and to serve your sentence in a environment that strips you of any meaning and any purpose. What gets you up? Like, what makes you do it? And this is a deep question. You may not have an answer, but, you know, how do you find enough purpose to get up every day and to just do life?
That's a good question. And sometimes I ask myself how I do it. You know, I had a moment today when I was in the day room and, you know, we were going to chow and I was just sitting there staring at the wall because what was on TV was not interesting me. The conversations of the people around me had no value for me. And so I found myself sort of staring off into space and retreating within myself. And I suppose the answer to your question is, I don't know. I don't know what it is that spurs me on. You know, there's times when the suffering is so stark and it feels so endless. You know, I'll be in my cell on the floor on my knees, and I'll just feel so alone. Like there's no force in the universe that cares what happens to one trans girl in prison.
Yeah.
And that's when I just reach within myself and.
Sorry, my allergies are acting up again. Yeah, I was talking to my mom about,
the future.
You know, like how lonely it is for you to be in prison and how, yes, you have your family, but you don't hear from them as often as you hear from me. Like, I'm someone that you talk to every day. And I told my mom that, you know, you had put me down as your next of kin. And so if anything happened to you, I would get a phone call letting me know.
Right.
And she was like, well, why would Skye have you do that? Like, does she have any family? I'm like, yes, but, you know, does she have anyone that can financially hop on a plane, go down, take care of things, make sure she gets buried, and be reachable, and that she trusts to handle those things? And not every resident at a correctional facility can say yes to that about their family and their actual kin, right? And sometimes you do have to assign a friend to handle those things. And, you know, Mom was kind of like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Go ahead.
Well, the truth is I have a biological family, but, you know, they don't treat me like family. You know, I guess they've just moved on in their lives, you know, and I've never done anything to them to deserve that. You know, the same loving Skye, you know, I was that same person to them. So I don't know why the last time I talked to my mom, she said she was sorry, you know, but she has her life to she's living in. She still hasn't registered her phone. My sister hasn't registered her phone. I can't call them. You know, and it's so easy to go on the internet and register your phone. My father, he hasn't been a part of my life. Since, I was a kid, and aunts and uncles. Well, I have no uncles, but my mom's sisters, same thing. My grandparents are all dead. I only have one living grandparent, and that's my dad's mom, and she actually sent me a letter saying that she had to that she hoped everything she wrote me a letter and told me that she hopes that I find peace in my life, but that she had to basically let me go. I can't quote the letter verbatim, but that was just a anyway, back to talking about hope.
Yeah, and I actually pulled out another one that they call it faith, but I think faith and hope can be interchangeable at times. I grabbed the prisoner who has lost faith in the future. His future was doomed. With his loss of belief in the future, he also lost his spiritual hold. He let himself decline and become subject to mental and physical decay. And, it's so powerful. It just gives me the chills. I thought about that because I thought about, one of the few things that keeps you going every day is the hope that someday you'll be released. That faith that maybe you'll get out. And it's a small thing, and maybe it's an impossible thing, but it is just enough to get you through. And I was thinking about, even in my own life, a sliver of hope, especially when I was first sober, after drinking very, very heavily. I lost my good job. I had a suicide attempt, and, my life was essentially ruined. I had ruined my life, and feeling so hopeless and so lost, and not knowing how I would stay sober, not knowing how I would hold down a job because I could barely work and get myself to work because I was so depressed and so sick. But I believed that, a better life would come. I believed that it would pass. And I didn't know how, and I didn't know how long it would take. I just believed that relief would come, and that was enough to get me through the day. And and I've done a lot of work with mediums and have had a lot of readings and spiritual advising, and so some of those readings I would just hold on to and be like, love's gonna come, home's gonna come, these things are gonna come. And I can remember lying in bed with my dog, and I'd pat him, and I'd be like, all of this is gonna get better. And I would cry, and that little sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, if I held on long enough, things would get better. And, that was at 25 years old, and I can't say that life started to get better until about 28. So I was in a very dark place for years before there was some kind of relief. And when I say relief, I mean just a little bit. I felt just well enough to start working again, and I felt just well enough to get through my day, but just barely. And I still wouldn't have the home that I'm in now for another year and a half from that point. So I was still, renting rooms, and my dog was a pit bull, so it made it very challenging to find any housing. And I would go from room rental to room rental to room rental. We would move every 3 months, and the last thing I would load into my car would be one box of keepsakes that I never opened because I never stayed anywhere long enough to open the box, and my dog. And my dog, when I would get down to the box and him, he'd get really like antsy and anxious because he knew like him and the box were next. You know, they were being packed up next. And then we go to the next room rental. And it was terrible. It was really, really, really terrible and scary and hopeless. And that belief that things would get better in the future, like just holding on to like that my future self would have an easier time, was the only thing that really got me through it. And I know hope has been that, how do I want to describe it? It's like this little whisper of being okay, you know, like it's not even like a voice of you're gonna be all right. It is like a little whisper, and that you hold on to it with all your might because it's all you have. If you did not have that sliver of hope, you would have nothing else.
Right. Yeah, I've had experiences of meditation where I felt completely blissful, and I felt as if nothing really mattered but that moment. And so I've had, you know, what different Eastern religions will, you know, have different names for, but enlightening experiences where all the suffering that I've been through opened itself up and basically lends itself to providing this amazing experience. And so it's not just hope for the future, but it's also the knowing that the life that I live, you know, it has the meaning for me in the sense that at any given point I could have another one of those experiences, and who knows, maybe the next time that I have one of those experiences, it will stabilize, and you know, I'll reach a state of being that where the suffering and the circumstances of being in a life in prison don't even matter anymore because of my state of being. It's such that I've had those experiences already, so you know I know they're there, and you know. He quotes a poet. He quotes a poet. He says it's in German. I'll read the English translation. He says, first I'll read the part where he leads into it. But I did not only talk of the future and the veil which was drawn over it, I also mentioned the past. All its joy and how it flashed shone even in the present darkness. Again, I quoted a poet to avoid sounding like a preacher who had written, "What you have experienced, no power on earth can take you from you. Not only in our experiences, but all we have done, whatever great thoughts we may have had, and all we have suffered, all this is not lost. Though it is past, we have brought it into being. Having been is also a kind of being, and past the surest kind." It says, "Then I spoke of the many opportunities of giving a life meaning. I told my comrades who lay motionless, although occasionally a sigh could be heard, that human life, under any circumstances, never ceases to have a meaning, and that this infinite meaning of life includes suffering and dying, privation and death." And so for me, that's a great example of my life being not necessarily the worst it could be, because there are people in the world who are suffering more. And so it's that creativity of thought to open my mind to the world instead of dwelling on being in prison and dwelling on, you know, not being able to provide for myself, or, you know, focusing on what I can do, you know, and what I do have. And it's just another change of perspective that really this book, Man's Search for Meaning, is all about. Is being able to change perspective and to utilize that perspective in a way that can make even the most wretched lives have powerful meaning, you know. And I know that someday, and it's not just a hope, it's a knowing, it's a feeling within me that I will make it through this. And then there will be a moment in time soon, someday, however far away it may be, and, you know, even if it is in another life, who knows? But I feel like that meaning will express itself and have value for others. And so that's another thing that keeps me, you know, when I wake up after you know, sleeping, and sometimes I wake up and I'm in my bunk and I just roll over and want to go back to sleep because the dream life that I just left from is much more preferable to what I just woke up to. And it's in those moments that I turn within and I go and I do my eyebrows and I focus on beauty and love, and I focus on those things that I have within me that I know that there's nothing that these people could ever do to take that away.
Right. The idea of we can't pick our circumstances, but we can choose our attitude. And I do think that's the biggest takeaway of this book, is that, you know, we don't get to choose what life throws at us, but we can choose the way we handle it. And it makes me, and I'm going to kind of go off down a different rabbit hole. It makes me think of when I first got sober, I was so self-pitying. And I'd be like, oh, why me? Like, why is this happening? Like, why am I homeless? Like, why did I lose my job? Like, why? And finally, like, an old timer was like, why not you? And I thought, my God, yeah, he's right. Like, why not me? You know, like, out of all the people I know, like, I'm probably the strongest person I know that can handle this kind of shit and be this down and out, and like I wouldn't wish this upon my worst enemy. And like I know me, and I know that I can get through this. And that was like the day that I just kind of sucked it up and started having a better attitude about it. Like, that I didn't know how I was gonna get through. Like, I really didn't. Like, there'd be days where I'd have 24 hours to leave an apartment and I didn't know where I was going, and I was just trusting the universe would, like, give me something and that it would be okay. And then at the very last minute, I would get a phone call and it would be, like, a relative or a friend being like, hey, do you need a place to stay? Like, you can rent a room here for a while. And when I let go of the self-pity of my circumstance, when I let it go and I started being accountable of, like, my life is shit because I drank it to oblivion, like, it was my addiction that led me down this path, like, this is my fault, it's my own doing, that was when things started to really get better. Like, you know, like, I drank to the point where my mental health tanked and I lost my job. Like, that was because of my addiction. Like, I need to own that. And that, you know, I wasn't handling my money or my life or anything in it. And that I wasn't a victim of that. Like, you know, life wasn't happening to me. It was just happening. And when I was able to shift my perception from life is happening to me to life is just happening and I need to rise to the occasion, that was when things really started to come back together. That's when things started to fall into place. But until that point, like, I didn't realize how self-pitying I was and how that self-pity made it so I had no ability to be accountable for anything that happened in my life. Like, I was just a professional victim that, you know, I got, like, the short stick, and that I was just unfortunate and unlucky, and that, you know, all these bad things happened to me, and woe is me. And when I stopped that, like, things started to get better. And now looking back, you know, because I have the ability, you know, a decade later to, I guess it's been longer than that. I was 26 when I got sober. I'm 37 now. I did have a relapse in between, but I've been sober for most of my adult life. And like, when I look back now and I look at like how responsible I am and how accountable I am for my shit, and like owning up and admitting when I'm wrong and when I've dropped the ball and like all these things. And then I see people that are stuck in self-pity. It like almost irritates me. I'm like, oh geez, they're such a victim. And it's almost like this resentment of like, well, I didn't get to be a victim, so why do they? And I have to remind myself that like everyone's on their own journey. Like, we all arrive when we arrive. Like, I can't force somebody to stop being a victim. You know, for me, like, that man saying that, just, it clicked with me. It resonated that day. And I was able to pull it together and to understand what he was saying to me and to acknowledge that, oh yeah, you're right. Like, I am like a professional victim and I need to cut that out. And like, think of how vastly different my life would be had he never said that to me. And I do believe that, you know, spirit and the universe will get you the right message from the right people right when you need it. And, you know, I was at that meeting and he said that to me and it just clicked, and that was what I needed to let go of that victimhood. We're picking up my family in the background because this mic is so sensitive, and I apologize to everyone that's listening. The mic is so sensitive, it's almost like we're eavesdropping on them. I can hear like dogs shuffling around. My mom like mentioned the toilet 10 minutes ago. All right, way to go, family. You know, multi-generational household issues. But yeah, when you first went to prison, did you experience the wave of self-pity, or like, were you always just kind of like, nope, I committed a crime, I'm supposed to be here?
I'll admit to a certain level of self-pity at times, but I never, that I can remember, I don't think I ever really focused on that. It was, you know, when I first got incarcerated, there really wasn't much time for that. You know, it was about surviving.
Right.
You know,
I was just thinking you were probably trying to figure out just how to survive the environment, because prison's very dangerous. And
yeah, there was really no room for self-pity. That, you know, it was either, you know, sink or swim, you know, and I didn't see myself falling victim to any of the prison bullshit that I had to go through when I first came down. I faced it head on.
Which, you know, I think about myself at 16, like, how terrifying. Like, I would have been terrified. I don't think at 16, well, first of all, I have told you I don't think I could navigate a prison now. You told me that I'm so sweet I'd be somebody's wife by the end of the day, which gave me some comfort. But
you'll be fine.
Like, yeah, I just feel like at 16 years old, like, I was such a little girl, and like, I thought I knew everything, but like, I would have been eaten alive. Like I wouldn't have been able to do it. And like, there is a certain amount of strength that we have to acknowledge for these minors that get put into these adult prisons to navigate an adult, dangerous, inhumane environment and figure out how to survive any way they can, in any way they have to.
You have 1 minute left.
Ooh, that went fast. Okay, so Skye, I'll have you call me back. We'll do our regular good night. Next week, we're going to dive into the power of the now, because I actually realized I had finished the book and I was like 10 pages away. So I loved picking this apart with you. Thank you so much for diving in and going down the rabbit holes and sharing your experience. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And join us next week to go over Power of the Now. And we'll figure out what chapters we're going to do and go from there.
See you next time.
All right, honey. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. I'll call right back.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So that was Man's Search for Meaning, which is, it's such an amazing book. If you haven't read it, please read it. There's so much wonderful, profound things that Viktor Frankl says in this book. It was a reread for me. It was a reread for Skye. That's how much we love the book, that we could read it again and pick out new things and just talk about life over and over again. I love books that get us thinking like that. We are going to be diving into the Power of the Now. We were actually going to do this first, and then I thought of Man's Search for Meaning, and I was like, oh, let's do Man's Search for Meaning first. We're going to be diving into Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of the Now.